Hello, folks. Thank you for joining me today as we begin to talk about level 3. How's everyone doing? I see a couple folks already in chat. But we're going to talk a little bit about what we expect for level 3, what the requirements are, how you're going to get those. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the more specific requirements for advancement. And yeah, I decided to just let myself get lit by the sun for this, although I think we shouldn't go too long. If we go too long, the sun will set and I don't have a light on in here, and then I'll just be shrouded in darkness. But yeah, let's dive on in. So, what's level 3? If anybody in the chat wants to answer what level 3 is, please feel free. But let's put it in context. I'm going to continue to do this, and I think it's important for folks to remember what the goal of the certification is when seeking that certification themselves. Level 1 is targeted for, and these, when I talk about what a level is for, I'm talking about the floor for the level, the lowest possible expectation that every judge of that level should be able to do. There isn't necessarily a ceiling on a level, right? We are defining this is the expectation every L1, every L2, every L3, etc. will be able to do whatever we define it as. And then there's a bit of a range until you start touching the territory of the next level. So level 1 can head judge a 16-player regular tier event. So handle a pre-release, handle a weekly play. Pretty straightforward. At level 2, we kick it up a notch, and it's handle a 16 to 32 player competitive tier event. The upper edge of expectation for level 2 is head judging a 64 player competitive tier event, acting as a team lead for one other judge. Generally not a ton of leadership, a small amount, but not a ton. And often it's going to be in-store, small, very small competitive events. Level 3 is for events where people are traveling a little bit further, either as a judge or as a player. This is competitive events above 65 players, up to about 120, 150. There aren't hard numbers on these yet, and I don't expect there to be, because there's always a challenge when running events that you don't actually know how many people will show up. You may have a planetary qualifier that has a cap of 128 and only 50 players show up. And you may expect 50 to 60 players because that's what you normally get, even if the store has space for 128. And so an event like that could still be head judged by a level 2 judge, even though it has a cap of 128. But for level 3, the expectation is head judging events of 65 to 128-ish players, team leading at destination events, and floor judge for destination events and high tier events being rocks on teams. These judges are generally also going to be more connected to their community. Part of the expectation and baked into the requirements for level 3 is connecting with the community more than just through one store. Starkiller asks, can a PQ be considered a destination event? When I use the term destination event, I mean sectors, regionals, galactics. It is not an official term used anywhere, but the expectation for a destination event is something along the lines of people are going to be traveling, getting multiple nights of hotel. Some people might fly to it. And don't get me wrong, I know that there are definitely planetary qualifiers that people have gotten a hotel for. I know that there are planetary qualifiers that people have flown to, but that's not a norm or an expectation. Whereas for things like sectors, regionals, and galactics, the expectation is that people are traveling to the destination. I think another way to put it is in the event advertising, is it the name of the store or the name of the city? Swoo Plan B says league championship in Europe that gives flight to Galactics. Again, could be, probably. Like, if folks are expected to travel and spend a couple days in the area, yeah, that counts as a destination event. However, there's nothing that explicitly is going to call, or I'm not planning on explicitly calling out destination events or types of events. What is more likely going to happen in requirements is definitions of based on player attendance or what you're actually doing. And so rather than saying, hey, for this certification or for this advancement, you need to be a team lead at a destination event, it'll say you need to be a team lead at an event with at least 250 players and at least 2 judges under your authority. Because what we're looking for is not the name of the event, but what the event actually is. The league championship events, I believe, that are happening in Europe with support from Asmodee, but aren't official organized play events for Star Wars Unlimited. It's weird. But those events have a cap of, I think, of about 128 players, and they're expecting in the 70 to 80 range, unless I'm misremembering what I've heard from folks who are going to be working those. And that sounds like an event that fits head judges L3, floor judges are L2. There's a little bit more prestige and there's a little bit more value that's coming to that. It might also be semi-invitational, which bumps up the complexity a degree. But the term destination event is one that I'm going to be using colloquially and not as a requirement for things. Requirements will always be looking at numbers, generally speaking, because that is really the indicator of what the event needs. The name of the event doesn't change the needs of the event. The number of players and the number of judges changes the needs of the event. Cascade 2244 says large PQ size but invitational. Yeah, so it's somewhere between a planetary qualifier, and for what it's worth, I call planetary qualifiers small competitive events. Even the large PQs are still relatively small. Sectors are mid-sized, and then things like regionals and galactics are large. Pretty much anything that can be done in a day is, in my books, considered a small event. Medium is over a couple hundred players, and large is at or over 1,000 players. So the larger regionals are going to be large, especially when you have players in multiple main events and side events. You probably get up to 1,000, even if the individual event isn't over 1,000. And Galactics, of course, is large. And again, those are colloquial terms. They are not terms that are going to be used definitionally or for requirements. And so you can feel free to use them however you want to see them. There are absolutely going to be players and judges who are like, yes, a small event is 16 players, a medium-sized event is 30 to 50 players, and the largest event I've ever worked is 100 players, and so 100 players is a large event. Coming from my experience where I've worked events with, I think the largest I've worked was an 8,000 player main event, and the largest hall I've worked in was, I think, 30,000 attendees across events and side events and programming and panels and all of that. 100 players compared to 30,000, not large, but anything above 1,000 is large. Anything where you're renting a convention center instead of getting a hotel ballroom or playing it in a game store. Hotel ballroom is medium, game store is small. Again, all colloquialism and relative, because a planetary qualifier might rent out a ballroom, or a planetary qualifier might happen at a convention at some point, even though I think that's something that FFG isn't particularly excited about. But the general track is very colloquial and just used as shorthands for a variety of things. Any definitions and requirements are going to have more concrete requirements, so you don't need to know what large is or what small is. You just need to know, does my event have 256 players or is expected to have 256 players? But lesson and syllabus. So As mentioned in the lesson overview, level 3 is going to focus much more on logistics and policy as opposed to rules. There will be some rule scenarios, but those are going to come later in the syllabus. To be frank, it's probably going to come after we get the subject matter expert on board and are able to get them up to speed and have them help me produce those. I'm very comfortable and very confident in the rules, but I think that something that I need to do and is easier with the assistance of somebody else is go through the existing lessons that we've covered, move things around and say, this should actually be an apprentice. This part in L1 should be in L2, and then we should move these things up to L3 and have a few things there. As I've mentioned many times before, the goal isn't to teach individual interactions or individual scenarios, but to teach underlying fundamental rules. And so far, we've covered the better part of the comprehensive rules. With a subject matter expert, though, we're going to take some time, refine exactly what is expected of judges of each level, have study guides so that you know this is tangential. Hi, be surprised, I'm on a tangent already. It actually took a while to get on tangent. Anyways, one of the things that I want to do is say, hey, welcome to L1. Here's what we're going to cover in L1. Here's what we're going to cover exactly in L2. And here's what we're going to cover in L3. This is what you can expect to have on the exam. Also, here's a lesson on level 1, playing cards. Here's a lesson on level 2, how to play cards, and go into more detail on each of them. And so you can go to the level of complexity you're looking for. It means redesigning pretty much every lesson we've released, but I think it ends up being higher quality for everybody and a better learning experience, and folks can approach things from a different angle. If somebody really wants to focus on an area of improvement, having horizontal learning track of L1 playing a card, L2 playing a card, L3 playing a card, as well as L1 playing a card, steps and phases of the turn, triggers and modified actions and nested abilities, keywords, etc. Being able to go in whichever direction you want, whether you want to drill deep into a single topic or get a broad level and understand everything, I think will help. But all that goes better if I have a subject matter expert to bounce ideas off of. Dihan asks, is this where the addition of skill badges will come in, as in mastery for these skills? I'm not sure exactly what form mastery badges or whatever I'm going to end up calling them, because mastery badges isn't finalized. But I think it is unlikely that it'll be in this area. The idea, and we're jumping around a little bit, but hey, this is a thing that I like to chat about, so we're going to chat about it. But the idea behind these advanced badges, these level 3 badges, are kind of actually like what Swoop Plan B says. Infinity Stones, collect them all for level 5. Not quite that, but they will be stepping stones on the way to level 4. Much like how the level 2 mentor certification is going to be a requirement for level 3, between 3 and 4, there will be a number of certifications that will be prerequisites for level 4. And so you can get those certifications one step at a time rather than having to go through a single process and go from nothing to complete in a moment. It's, okay, I got my team lead certification, I got a investigation certification, I've demonstrated my proficiency at running side events. However, I need to really figure out I need to spend some more time figuring out the precise details of what L4 entitles, or entails, the exact differences between L3 and L4, and what steps to take to get from point A to point B, and then which ones are possible to do as independent certifications. Some things are very subjective and it's hard to provide a rubric for them. And so it's better to wrap it up with other things. One of the things that is going to be happening probably for L4 and L5 is looking at candidates and looking at them in regards to all of the aspects of a judge and evaluating where the candidate is strong, where the candidate is weak. And it's not going to be a requirement that you are above average or exceptional in all 6 aspects, because that's not how people are. Some people are very good at being leaders and personal skills and mentorship, and kind of suck at personal growth and kind of suck at logistics. And I'm not sure exactly what the numbers are going to look like, but somebody who's good at 2 out of the 6 aspects may still be qualified for level 4. And if we said there are 6 badges that you need to get, otherwise you can't advance, and they were each tied to a single aspect, it's harder to advance than if it's one holistic thing where we look at your strengths and weaknesses at the same time. So Plan B says stairs instead of a cliff. Yep. And the stairs are non-linear, and so you could step on the 3rd step instead of the 1st step. So stairs doesn't quite work as a metaphor because it's a non-Euclidean staircase, but Dafu asks, what are the chances the higher levels involve interviews with judges already at the higher levels like some other games? That's short answer, yes, but also no. It will very likely be with Cascade rather than with individual judges, because if we ask a judge to do a specific interview like that, like some other games do, we're going to be compensating that person for their work, and we already have subject matter experts on staff. However, it's not necessarily going to be in-person formal interviews or even online interviews. For example, the L2 mentorship certification kind of is that. Instead of sitting down and having a conversation of how would you mentor a candidate, you just submit an example of your mentorship, right? And similarly, the tournament reports requirement for level 3, where we're getting ahead of ourselves, but whatever, it's fine. I'm in charge of the show. I can talk about whatever I want. Having tournament reports is essentially me taking candidate and sitting down with somebody and being like, okay, talk to me what you would say if we had this cheating investigation, you need to disqualify them. What do you write in your statement? But rather than sitting down and having that conversation, I simply have them submit a tournament report. I read that tournament report. I compare it to the rubric. I determine whether or not it meets the requirements, and then either accept it or decline it. And so at some point, there's going to be things where it is ideal if candidates are evaluated on more subjective qualities. Mentorship is already relatively subjective, but looking at reviews is a pretty good example of how somebody provides mentorship. Similarly, like communication regarding logistics is going to be relatively subjective. It's going to be dependent on how that person acts in the moment, but looking at a tournament report is a okay facsimile of how that is. It's not going to get that stress management that you need in a live event, but it gives you some information. But there are some things that are really hard to evaluate, like stress management or interpersonal conflict management. Talking about like policy philosophy, we could have people write essays, but making people write essays seems a little bit silly. So figuring out exactly what the L4 and L5 advancement requirements look like and what that process looks like is still development. Having interviews, I think, brings a lot of value. Has anybody in the chat gone through the level 2 mentorship certification process? I know that I've handed out a handful of them, about 100, but I don't know off the top of my head if anybody's gone through that process. Starkiller07700, yeah, says yes. Fantastic. So for every single person who's submitting something for the mentorship certification, whether they are accepted or declined, I'm also writing an email being like, hey, you've gotten accepted. However, looking at your feedback that you've given, the mentorship that you're giving in this very small snapshot that doesn't necessarily represent everything that you do as a mentor, here's what I think you're doing well and I think you should continue doing. Here's some ways that you can improve and make your feedback better. And these sorts of advancement requirements and certifications is going to ideally always have some sort of direct feedback component. When I was advancing in other games, to reach the pinnacle of those programs, there was a panel interview where I sat down with 3 senior judges who probably had combined 30-ish years of experience, and they grilled me for 3 hours over everything I'd ever done as a judge, and everything I thought about judging. First time I went through that process, I failed. The second time I went through that process, I passed. 3 to 4 hours is a bit long for those interviews, but it was both times both a very difficult and stressful situation, but also incredibly valuable, because I sat down for several hours with some of the best minds in the program, and the focus was, how good is Jonah and how do we make him better? Where does he need to improve? Where is he good enough? Where is he a leader in the field? And getting that sort of evaluation and mentorship was incredible. I would love to do that for actually every single person in this judge program. However, there are thousands of you, and spending 8,000 hours means that, like, if I spend 4 hours per candidate, I would not do any other work until 2030. And that's not super viable. However, if that's something that we do for just L4 and L5, it's going to be a much smaller number of candidates, and we can provide better feedback and mentorship to a smaller group. And then those people can provide mentorship to level 3s, who provide mentorship to level 2s, who provide mentorship to level 1s. And it kind of sounds like a pyramid scheme, because it kind of is based on just the numbers of judges, but it's also not a pyramid scheme because the goal is to help elevate everybody. But that's a bit of a tangent, and we're going to just scroll back up, because that was, well, what question was that answering? Oh yeah, is this where the addition of skill badges come in? And then Dafu's question of what are the chances higher level interviews involve judges at higher levels? Wolfstrider 562 says somewhere in the middle of all that. So if I'm understanding right, someone can still get into, let's say, level 4, but can still have weaknesses to work on to keep improving. Yep, absolutely. There's not going to be a certification that expects perfection from a candidate at any point. One of the things that you'll notice if, again, I don't know how many people read the aspects of judging lessons or reviewed those lessons, but in every single one of them, for level 1, level 2, and level 3, for each sub-aspect, which is a whole lot of sub-aspects, we talk about what is the expectation for a judge at that level. And so what I'll probably end up doing is creating a dedicated page for level 3. Here are the expectations for you for rules knowledge, for policy knowledge, for policy philosophy. And then you just have a single one-page place where you can look at what are all of the expectations for me as a judge at this certification level. And again, perfection isn't expected, and being exceptional, 5 out of 5 stars in a couple qualities will absolutely cover up for a couple below average area of improvements, 2 out of 5 stars. So I think that that's a resource that is relatively easy to make, and I should make, and might come today, might come tomorrow, but also I have the level 3 lessons to continue developing. But having just a single page resource of here's the expectations for you for your entire level for every single aspect carries some value. And it'll help you figure out that, oh, you're in fact not perfect at everything. Also, if you didn't know you weren't perfect in everything, I am sorry to let you know about that. DeCaniel asks, are there plans to include community involvement in level expectations? Report could be one, but more linked to operational reports and DQ reports, or is it out of scope, separate treatment levels? I don't plan on making particularly hard requirements for community. Some people just aren't here for the community. At like level 4 and level 5 are outliers. Level 1, 2, 3, not going to have a requirement for community. It is valuable to be in touch with the community, but there's never going to be an expectation of judges meaningfully contributing to the community. Part of that is because somebody who is doing something to support the community, to support the judge program, is beginning to start to do stuff that falls under Cascade's purview. And while I encourage folks who want to contribute to the community to do so, and will signal boost people who do so, if we tell you, you have to write an article that's then hosted on Nexus, that sure sounds like somebody's doing my job for me. And so there might be some level of expectation of you're not a complete unknown. People know who you are, but that kind of falls more into presence and leadership than it does in community. It's talked about a little bit in some of the aspect lessons, what is expected for community for various levels. Where is it? Yeah, community networking and relationships under interpersonal skills and communication. But it isn't going to be a requirement to be active in the Discord or provide particular commentary. It is helpful. And when we talk about presence, which is how you are known in the community, if you're simply unknown, it's going to be harder to get people to listen to you, and your leadership is going to suffer. People are going to be less likely to want to work with you. There are names and faces in this community other than my own that a lot of people are very excited to work with, because those people are active in the community and they are members of the community. And so it's not going to be a hard requirement, but it is intrinsically connected to a lot of other things. Judges who are active in the community, I think, are generally better at policy philosophy because they're having conversations with judges about the expectations for policy. I think they're generally better with logistics because they have conversations about best practices. So out of scope is the short answer to what about community. Also 6 seasons in a movie or something along those lines. In any case, alrighty. At this point, I think I've handled all the questions that are in chat, and so we're going to go into the advancement requirements for level 3. Like the other certifications, there's some event experience required for level 3. One of the experience requirements is be a level 2 for 6 months. I'm testing out time gating certifications. Part of this is to help set expectations. If you pop over to cascadegames.com/levels and look at the standard recommendation and exceptional qualifications for a candidate, it's L2 for a year is the standard recommendation, and for exceptional as well. And honestly, exceptional might be bumped up a little bit, but don't expect to go L1, L2, L3 in the space of 2 weeks or 2 months, right? It is spend some time with the game and get used to the game. And at L2, I want you to spend some time at competitive events, going to competitive events, judging at competitive events before you push for level 3. Part of these time gates and part of these more comprehensive requirements, recommendations, and qualifications is to let people know and to explain to folks this isn't just hit the minimum and go. This is an ongoing process. Level 5 isn't going to be for everybody. Level 4 isn't for everybody. 3 isn't for everybody. 2 isn't for everybody. There are a ton of people who are delighted to be level 1 or apprentices and are actively judging, because that's all that they and their community need from them. The minimum requirements are, hey, my store has a PQ coming up, and we need a level 2 to be the head judge of it. Great, go for the minimum requirements. If you're somebody who there are a bunch of other certified judges in your area and you don't need the certification to run events or else the events don't launch, I encourage you to go for the standard recommended requirements or prerequisites. It will make you a better judge when you advance. Something to think about is when you advance, and this is going to be a little bit of like judge philosophy and also a little bit of, I don't know, group social dynamic philosophy, but when you're level 2, people have certain expectations from you because, as we talked about before, your expectations are set on what the minimum is for that level. So if I say you're a level 1, my expectations are you're able to achieve the minimum. And before I know you, that's all I'm going to expect from you. And when you perform above those, because you're close to L2, you're going to outperform expectations. When you advance to L2, I expect you to be performing at least at the floor of L2. However, when you advance, the difference between your performance and the minimum expectation for you is going to be a lot smaller because you just advanced. And so going up the ladder as quickly as possible means that for a longer period of time, you're going to be struggling against external perception of you. People are going to be like, oh yeah, you're a new L2, you're doing new L2 things, as opposed to, oh yeah, you've been in L2 for 2 years, you're somebody that I can turn to and just say, hey, can you get this done? And it will get done. And then if you advance to L3, even though you have that reputation as a rock solid L2 and somebody that head judges and team leads turn to get things done, as an L3, you're going to be stepping into new roles that you haven't necessarily had before. And in addition to your old responsibilities, you're going to be doing new things. And since you don't have 2 years of experience doing those things, you're going to be worse, comparatively speaking, to how you were performing before at that different set of tasks. And so people will treat you a little bit more carefully and a little bit more cautiously, and they're not going to push you as hard necessarily, just because the distance between the expected floor and your actual ability is smaller. A way to think about it is if a week after you certified for L1, you were put in charge of the Galactic Championships with 2,000 players, how do you think other judges would expect you to perform, right? They would expect very good things of you if you were running a weekly play, and are going to have lower expectations when you're running something that they see as above your certification or right at your certification, pushing your limits. And so taking more time to advance means that you're going to be able to develop a long-term reputation for quality, which I think is incredibly valuable. But, so requirement number 1, be a level 2 judge for 6 months. Again, this is experimental. We haven't had time gates for anything before other than cooldowns on retaking the exam. But I think that putting it in writing is going to be helpful in getting folks to be aware of the prerequisites. It's also going to hopefully slow down the number of folks messaging me the week of a planetary qualifier being like, hey, I don't have a judge. Is it possible for somebody in my store to become certified as head judge for the event on Saturday in the next 3 days? That would be great. Thank you so much. Because then I'll say, no, it requires at least 6 months. The second requirement is have 2 leadership roles as an L2. So leadership roles are defined as acting as head judge of a competitive tier event with at least 1 floor judge, assistant head judge of a competitive tier event with at least 200 players, or team leading a destination event with at least 1 floor judge. Oh, hey, look, I use destination event as a definition and not using hard numbers. I can edit and update that. But the idea is not like I went to a planetary qualifier. There was a head judge, there was me, and there was a floor judge, and I told that floor judge what to do. Don't think that is going to count, because at a 3-person event, and you're being the team lead, there's not as much leadership because the head judge is doing most of the leadership there. And so it's an expectation where there are multiple team leads. Head judge roles without supervision over floor judges do not count toward this requirement. So if you're the head judge of planetary qualifier and you're the only judge on that event, doesn't count for the L3 requirements. Multiple leadership roles in the course of a destination event weekend only count as a single experience. If you're a team lead on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at a regional championship, that is one event. Part of why we have this requirement, and it's mirroring the requirement for L2, is because, again, I want you to take some time and be able to learn and grow from the experience. While you absolutely can work an event on Friday, learn from your experiences, work on Saturday, learn from your experiences, and see growth by Sunday, it's going to be significantly less growth than working Friday, Saturday, Sunday, getting feedback, waiting a week or 2 weeks or a month, working another event, or waiting 3 or 4 months and working another event and getting growth there. That distance and time to evaluate and look back on things is going to give you a lot more growth opportunities. Also, it means that like people aren't trying to game the system in weird ways. This applies, for example, for L2 advancement requirements as well. But if somebody's like, I would like to work the limited regional championship on Friday, the premier one on Saturday, and the promo event on Sunday, so that I get all 3 of my events done, as opposed to the person who's like, yep, I'm going to be happy working the limited regional championship Friday, Saturday, and then relax tier side events on Sunday. I'm going to get 1 event. Somebody else gets 3 events for the same value of experience. And so we're not looking at individual tournaments. We're looking at event experiences. Notably, for the level 3 requirement of having leadership roles as an L2, leading side events or managing relaxed tier events can count towards the requirement. And so if you are the head judge or team leading side events at something like, say, Gen Con or PAX Unplugged or convention, this can count. If you're running like the Star Wars Unlimited or the TCG space at your local convention, as long as you have dedicated Star Wars judges, this can count. It doesn't have to be competitive tier leadership, because the aspects of what we're looking for in this experience, the difference between L2 and L3, is predominantly in that leadership and logistics area, not necessarily in that competitive tier knowledge. Endorsement. Like with other levels, L3 requires an endorsement. It must come from a tournament organizer that has hosted a planetary qualifier, not just any competitive tier events. Because we're saying that you can run 65 to 128 player events, we're going to be just a little bit more precise with our expectations and requirements. Or an L4 judge. No L4 judges exist. But the expectation is slightly higher caliber of store. I do think that the vast majority, something like 80% of stores that have the competitive tier status on Nexus, are also planetary qualifier hosts. And we have a list of all of the stores that have hosted planetary qualifiers, so we should be able to update that. And they'll have competitive tier TO/PQ hosts. The other part is the endorsing party must not have previously endorsed you. This will be a barrier for some candidates, but the goal here is to ensure that level 3 judges have multiple points of contact within the community. And so going to Daniel, your comment earlier about, is community going to be a requirement? Not an explicit requirement of you must contribute to the community in this way, but you do have to have some connection to community. A lot of people have raised concerns that this is going to be very difficult for them. This is definitely a bit of an experiment, but the underlying philosophy is, some people are like, oh yeah, for my level 1 endorsement, I got endorsed by a PQ host, but for the second one, I got endorsed by a destination TO. So I've already been endorsed by 2 major parties. It's possible, like, that person can still go to either of those 2. So this language needs to be reworded a little bit, but essentially it's going to be, you must have at least 2 different entities, that one of which meets the requirement for L3 in your previous endorsements. So if you've had endorsements coming from 2 people who are already qualified for that, you're going to be able to get that endorsement. I see a couple questions in chat. Alrighty. So Daniel asks, are Cascade and FFG going to be able to enforce these definitions both at planetary qualifier levels? Yes, but especially at sectors and higher with private TOs. So I don't believe I'm going to say that level 3 is, I don't have plans to say level 3 is a requirement to team lead at events, at sectors or regionals. There's no plans for that. And so it's not an enforced, like, there isn't a plan to require it with those tournament organizers. It is possible that higher levels, L4 and L5, are expected and required for head judge roles. And it is probable that at some point we require L2 or higher for, like, at the very least, Galactics. Probably Galactics ends up requiring, once the program is fully mature in several years, I want to be clear, soonest I can see this happening is 2 years from now, and it could be as many as 5, requiring level 3 to be floor judge at Galactics. But sectors and regionals, I would generally expect, if you're working the main event, you're a level 2 on the floor. And those are things that are relatively enforceable. Like, head judge and floor judge are enforceable. We're not going to try and enforce team leads, because that is a complex subject in a bunch of different ways, especially regarding figuring out how people are staffed, because different tournament organizers have team leads selected in different ways. Some people hire specifically for the team lead role. Other people say, head judge, this is your staff. You figure out who you want your team leads to be. Daniel also asks, how do you foresee the loop problem of expecting leadership as a requirement, meaning judges already get it and don't need to have the level? So the loop requirement, there isn't actually a loop here. The leadership roles that are required to advance to L3 are leadership roles expected of an L2. The leadership roles required to advance to L4 will be the leadership roles that require being an L3. So you'll note here that head judge of a competitive tier event with at least 1 floor judge is something that level 2 judges can do. Being an assistant head judge of an event with at least 200 players, that's not going to be commonly found with an L2, at least to start. And team leading at destination events with at least 1 floor judge, this is something that L2 judges can do and will be doing. And so level 3 will unlock new things. For example, so let's use the head judge example because it's the cleanest. This is essentially saying you've been the head judge of a 40 to 60 player event with 1 other floor judge. That is very firmly within the expected role of level 2. And then, so it is do leadership at the level 2 level unlocks level 3. And so I don't think that there is a loop here in that in order to advance, you must already be doing the job. It's in order to advance, you must already be doing the highest level thing that the previous level allows you to do, or is expected from is the highest level thing that is not that does not yet require the next certification. So it's, are you performing at the top of your class? Great, you meet the requirement. You can now advance. Cascade 2244 says TOs are going to care a lot more about candidates they trust rather than an arbitrary number. Ideally, this isn't an arbitrary number. Ideally, the requirements, the testing, etc., all point towards candidates who have a set of skills. Of course, tournament organizers do trust people they trust more than somebody they don't know with a number next to their name. However, in my experience, if a judge works with a new tournament organizer, they are much more likely to say, okay, you have a, let's use the existing levels, including level 3 for Star Wars. Somebody's like, hey, I've never worked with you before, but I want to be the head judge for your 400 player event. TO is going to say, cool, I don't know who you are. I'm going to have you on my event. I wouldn't trust a random as a team lead on my event, but I will trust a random level 3 as a team lead on my event. And after you do an event with me, then I can trust you as a head judge, whereas I'm going to otherwise trust people that I've already worked with. And so levels aren't going to say, when I apply for this event with a new TO, I automatically get that role, but it is a shortcut to developing trust, or a accelerant to developing trust, because the candidate has already demonstrated, I have this level of rules and policy knowledge that is the expectation in order to do those roles. I already have shown that I can provide mentorship, which is going to be expected of me. I have already shown that I can communicate clearly and effectively about event logistics and investigations, which is going to be expected of me. Now, all you need to do is actually meet me and get to know me, have me work an event or two at the team lead level or as a rock on a floor judge role, and then give me those higher level logistical positions. So I don't think calling levels an arbitrary number, I don't think is quite accurate. It is a little bit arbitrary, but as the levels advance, getting those certifications is going to be harder because there are requirements, and I think those requirements are generally associated with demonstrating skill. DeCaniel says, so the philosophy is especially for planetary qualifier head judge and participating in Sector Plus is only a positive accelerator in that checklist rather than an expected requirement. Okay, I get it now. Yes. You should be able to get to level 3. If you head judge 2 planetary qualifiers with 50 players and 1 floor judge, or a store employee who's under your authority, you are qualified to advance to level 3. However, let me hit buttons. This is the button I'm looking for. Yeah. So this is where we're talking about these requirements. So you'll note that the minimum requirement is 2 leadership roles as an L2. The standard recommendation is head judge of a competitive tier event with at least 64 players and 2 floor judges, or team lead at a destination event with at least 2 floor judges under your authority, and at least 3 leadership roles as an L2, and at least 6 competitive tier events as an L2. And I've at least gone to a destination event as a player or as a judge. Level 3 judges are going to be expected to be more... Rather, it's not that level 3 judges are expected to attend destination events. However, there is going to, when you say, hi, I'm a level 3 Star Wars Unlimited judge, a lot of tournament organizers are going to assume that you have that level of experience because there's going to be a lot more investment required. And so looking at these standard recommendations compared to these minimum requirements is you could get away with 2 32-player planetary qualifiers and having a floor judge at each of them. The standard requirement is going to take probably a competitive season or 2 rather than a weekend that has 2 PQs nearby. In addition to, of course, L2 for at least a year. Somebody who's exceptional has team led twice at destination events and been head judge twice rather than doing one of those once. Being assigned to every team at destination events. Have been to 8 competitive tier events as an L2, right? There's a lot more going on in these higher level recommendations. And again, the minimum requirements are the minimum requirements. They are the floor. They will get you, if you have those requirements, you have what is necessary to become a level 3 judge. However, I recommend going or aiming for the standard recommendations because it will make you a better level 3 judge. You will have more experience. You'll know what you don't know. You'll know what you do know just a little bit better. So that's the experience. That's the endorsement. Talking about endorsements is real tricky. A bunch of people have reached out to me being like, hey, I'm in this weird situation. Please continue to reach out to me when we have the tech solution implemented. If you are not able to get the endorsement and you believe that you meet the philosophical requirements of you're connected to the tournament or to the larger competitive scene in at least 2 ways, reach out to me and I'll see if I can find a meaningful update to policy to allow it to work. I'm not going to give anybody an exception. Individuals don't get exceptions. I do change the rules though. I don't like giving individual exceptions because that's not fair to people who don't reach out proactively. However, changing the rules can feel like an exception because you're the first person who gets it, but it also opens the door for everybody else who doesn't have the privilege of access to me or the comfort of reaching out to me, because I try to be fairly accessible. Anybody can just message me on Discord and be like, hey, this is where I'm at. But I will listen to all of you and try to make things better. Alrighty. Requirements. We have two more. We have the L2 mentorship certification. This is because we expect you as a level 3 judge to be able to help mentor people. I expect that as a level 3 judge, you're able to endorse level 1 candidate, and you'll be able to also endorse level 2 candidates. There's not going to be a separate certification upon reaching level 3 to be able to endorse level 2 candidates, because we've already tested, can this person give meaningful feedback to a candidate? There is the reviews rubric mentioned in the L2 mentorship certification section, both on this page and in the resources, that goes over what we're looking for in reviews that you write for that certification. It's going to be covered in more detail in an upcoming lesson on the L2 mentorship certification, walking you through what you need to do to get that certification, what a good review looks like, what a bad review looks like. But you don't need to endorse or certify judges for level 1 to become a level 3. And once you become level 3, again, you are not required or expected to continue to endorse or certify judges. This isn't actually a pyramid scheme, despite what I said earlier. However, if you are somebody who has that mentorship certification and have started to endorse multiple judges, and you're getting to the point where you're like, oh, I think I could help people get to level 2, great sign that you're ready for level 3. With the L2 mentorship certification, and I'll talk about this more in the dedicated lesson, you can submit either 1 or 2 reviews for evaluation by me. Submitting more reviews doesn't necessarily improve your chances, because what I'm looking for is, do you hit everything that's laid out in the rubric? There are 5 key points in the rubric, and I guess we're going to just swap back to that real fast. Let's actually make it so you can read it. That'd probably be good. Can you read it? There we go. Yeah, now you can read it. So the 5 big categories are actionable advice. You tell them what they can do, not just, hey, this is what I observed. If it's just observations, it doesn't give them direction. Accurate evaluation. You should be accurate. Telling somebody that they're bad at rules and also that they understand the CR better than you do and anybody that you've ever met, maybe not accurate evaluation. Constructive criticism means that you're able to highlight areas of improvement. Meaningful praise says that you're nice and not just critical of them. And then overall tone is kind of vague, but the idea of the feedback that we're delivering is we are trying to develop and grow the community, develop and grow judges, make people excited to give and receive feedback. One of the big things that I note in the feedback that I receive is that it is very clinical and formal, and it feels like somebody who is reviewing a workplace employee, which makes a lot of sense because a lot of people who are coming to this from corporate atmospheres, because the vast majority of, or one of the major demographics of Star Wars Unlimited players is adults who have jobs. And when you say, hey, review somebody who you have worked with, you're going to take a very formal tone because you don't want to get somebody you like in trouble. Remember that there are 2 people on the planet who can read a review unless one of them shares it elsewhere. The person who wrote it and the person who's receiving it. I cannot read reviews unless they are explicitly shared with me, such as through this L2 mentorship process. And so I strongly encourage you to use second person pronouns, saying you instead of the subject's name, instead of being like Cascade 2244 did this. I think that Cascade 2244 is pretty good at this. Instead say, you did a pretty good job at this. I think that you should continue to do blah, blah, blah. Being relaxed, throwing in jokes, talking to the person in particular rather than to an unknown third party is a great way to match tone. In any case, if you can hit all 5 of those, that's all you need to do in your reviews. I think the shortest review I've approved is like maybe 5 or 6 sentences, because they were like, hey, I saw you handle this rule call and it was good. I saw you handle these announcements and it was bad. Here's how you could do better at these announcements. It was a pleasure to work with you and I hope that I get to work with you again. And that hits all 5 of them. Having 2 separate reviews, though, means that if you have a candidate or a subject where you only have critical feedback and you weren't able to find anything positive to say, or a candidate where you didn't have anything critical to say, you can have one review that has the meaningful praise or the constructive criticism. They don't need to overlap. Or if with one of them, you're just like, hey, I observe this area of improvement. However, it's an area where I also can improve. I don't have any advice because I haven't figured out how to solve it. That also works as having 2 reviews allows you to split up what these expectations are. Not every single review needs to have all 5 of these bullet points other than overall tone. So that's the mentorship certification. That brings us to the second written portion, which is the tournament report. Tournament reports, again, will have a dedicated lesson and rubric for evaluation, just like the L2 mentorship certification. A lot of people have written tournament reports. A lot of those people were head judges. I don't know if I've seen many tournament reports written by floor judges at an event. I'm confident that I've not seen a single tournament report written by a judge attending an event as a player. Anybody who attends an event can write a tournament report. You can write a tournament report for any event you go to. If you're like, oh, I'm really interested in level 3, but I want to play in the Galactic Championship or I want to play in regionals, go play. You can still write your tournament report from that perspective. Essentially, the rubric's going to be calling out the things that we're looking for. And what we're looking for is your ability to write a statement in case you need to disqualify a player and submit a statement to FFG. What we're not going to require you to do is disqualify a player, write a statement, and submit a statement, because that would incentivize you to disqualify players who didn't necessarily need to be disqualified. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to get our nearest parallel to that, which is write about the logistics and details of a match or game or specific call or a tournament as a whole. Express that you understand what's happening in that scenario, and see that, or demonstrate that you can communicate what was happening. It is directly analogous to the skills necessary for writing a disqualification statement. And while level 1 and level 2 judges have to be able to disqualify players, and in fact have had to previously disqualify players, the frequency with which judges at level 3 will be involved with disqualifications is going to be significantly higher. And consequently, this is where this becomes a requirement. For both the mentorship certification and for tournament reports, I'm going to put in some language on both of them saying that these can be submitted in a non-English language. However, reviewing those will take a little bit longer. I will likely use Google Translate or some other assisted translation tool to translate non-English tournament reports and reviews into English. And it will take longer to get a response simply because I have to work through that translation tool. And then I'm going to reach out to individuals. If I am going to reject or decline an application, if it is gone through translation, I am more likely to reach out to a candidate and be like, hey, this seems to be lacking in these particular areas. There seems to be some confusion or lack of, I am having trouble comprehending XYZ, or the tone is weird. Can you talk to me about that? There's going to be a little bit more leeway because things that go through translator might not carry through tone, or they might not be able to carry nuance that is in the native language. However, those conversations are going to be in English because unfortunately that is the only language I speak. It is possible that that is delegated occasionally to other members of the team who are multilingual. However, we don't have a lot of language support in our team currently, and while that's something that I would like to continue to expand and support more, that costs money, and particularly with regards to written documentation, that becomes a little bit more personal. Having people come in and translate exam questions, very easy to do because that's content we created. Having somebody come in and translate something that was submitted just to me and is not publicly available gets a little bit hairier because that is something that that person individually wrote. Cascade2244 asks, are you ever going to want to look at DQ reports? I feel like that's not something that should be shared with Cascade generally. I don't wanna. No, I'm good. If you as a judge are seeking personal guidance on, hey, I had a disqualification this weekend, I'm not really sure how to write my statement to Fantasy Flight, can you help me on that? Happy to help out individual judges, but on a program-wide level, absolutely no intention of having that ever shared with Cascade. That is not something that we do. They should be submitted directly to Fantasy Flight. And we as Cascade don't need to look at it at all. I, as Jonah, as your friend and mentor, I'm happy to do it if you'd like my insight, but I'm not going to require to it. As Gentle Giant 303 says, talk to a mentor you trust about how to write them. If I meet that qualification, happy to do it. But I would be doing it outside of my role as program director and would be doing it in my role as level 2 and ideally soon to be level 3 judge for Star Wars Unlimited. So that covers a lot of what L3 is. Again, I mentioned in the article, I mentioned beginning earlier in the stream, I'm going to keep on mentioning it because I know that it is not widespread, and the only way I can spread it further is by saying it more and by getting more people to hear it and get it into more people's heads. But there are no exceptions to requirements for any individual. However, with feedback, the requirements may change on a global level. The alternative has to be scalable, so it can't be Jonah personally evaluates me over the course of a year to determine whether or not I'm ready for L3 and writes an endorsement for me. I can't do that for dozens, much less hundreds of people, and does not reduce the quality of candidates. So if somebody's like, hey, I really want L3, can I, instead of doing 2 leadership roles at competitive tier events, do 50 relaxed tier events? No leadership role, just 50 relaxed tier events. And I'm like, so that, even though you're getting a bunch of experience, even though you're doing weekly play every week, that's not clearing the bar for what we're looking for. We're looking for competitive tier, and requiring only relaxed experience is going to result in a lower quality candidate. But if somebody's struggling with the written portions of the advancement process, reach out to Cascade or to me directly, either via email or Discord. Or if there are any other requirements that are problematic, please reach out to me. I am comfortable reducing requirements and making things more accessible, but again, I don't want to make things easier. It's, however, possible that I have mistuned things, and it is dependent on your feedback, because I don't have your experiences. I can't know unless somebody tells me how I can be improving, what I can be improving. I have limited observational capacities, even though I have friends everywhere. On the Play Game says, I think the hardest hurdle to jump is the leadership roles, since there are only so many leader roles, but this is more exclusive tier 2, so makes sense. Yeah, and this is something that I want to talk about a little bit. I know that there are going to be people who are currently level 2 judges who are like, hey, I'm not able to make level 3 and I want level 3, but I can't get those, I can't find the roles. And it's like, okay, how large are your local competitive tier events? How large are the events that you are going to? Because every single role, or every single leadership role, every single prerequisite should be doable as a level 2, even when the system has level 3 judges in it. And if you're not able to find the roles that require level 2, it's going to be exceptionally unlikely that you're in an area or in a position that requires judges be level 3. And so I know that there are going to be some people who are in more remote areas of the world who are like, hey, I literally cannot make level 3 without buying a $500 plane ticket, because I can't meet these event requirements. And the unfortunate answer is, are there any events that require level 3 that you would be traveling to, or do you just want the certification because it is a nice thing to have? And it is possible that I've miscalibrated and that it is not possible to reach level 3 in areas where level 3 is required. But I think that the vast majority of the time, when the next level is inaccessible, it is because you are not already able to go to the events that require that certification level one way or another. It may mean that it's tough, because while I want the program to be as accessible to as many people as possible, there are also those standards of quality that we want to maintain. So that'll be difficult to manage, but it's something that I'm also going to be very conscious of and keeping an eye on. Gentle Giant 303 says, do you know when the endorsement option will be live? I'm not sure exactly. I still need to get the requirements for that and the other requirements for the prerequisites over to our programmer. Ideally, all of the prerequisites are in, like, the requirements will be given to the programmer this week. Most of the prerequisites are variations on existing prerequisites, but we do need to do a data import to get the PQ TO hosts data in, as well as a little bit more. I would expect 2 to 4 weeks, but it might be a little bit longer. I'm hoping to be on the shorter end. I'll make sure to make an announcement when it's available. And if you, I was going to say you can always just check to see if you have the prerequisites met by going to the exam hub, but the exam won't exist until I make it, and that's going to be towards the tail end of the certification, because one of the ways I make the exam is I go through all of the lessons and then create questions based on the lessons. So I make sure I taught you stuff that's on the exam. And so, yeah, it'll be some of the stuff will be available on your profile through your view applications tab. But don't have a deadline or explicit timeline on that at this point in time. With that being said, that just about wraps up this introductory lesson. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to throw them in chat now. I'm going to vamp for a little bit before I end this broadcast. But as always, thank you so much for joining me. We should have another lesson coming out very soon. These are going to start to be regular. Ideally, it's going to be at least one a week. I'm going to try and hit 2 a week, but I'm also juggling more now than I was when I was developing the L1 and L2 lessons. And so it might be a little bit trickier to get those lessons to come out at that cadence. However, if and when we have the subject matter expert on board, ideally that reduces some of my workload and I can get back to focusing on these things, and that increases the cadence, but also I have to manage somebody else and that takes away work time. You don't need to hear all about my internal work drama with myself, I guess. I don't know. But it looks like I don't have any questions in the chat right now. So thank you all so much for joining me. Come back to join us in roughly 17 hours, I believe, if my internal clock is correct. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. I don't know what time that is anywhere else on the planet because my brain is a little bit fuzzy right now. I'm going to be doing my third broadcast of the week with my friends from Fanfinity, talking about staffing for Galactics. The applications for Galactics with Fanfinity have been reopened. It's a soft reopen. They haven't made a hard push or announcement. So you can find out more there. I'm going to be talking with Fabio and Robin just about Galactics, their philosophy on staffing, and answering any questions you all may have. There is a thread in the Discord forums regarding that. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in there, and I'll talk to you all later. Have a good one.